Judge plays Truth or Lie with Black Teen. Seconds later, he's left speechless by a legal genius. The gavel slammed against the wooden desk with a sharp crack, silencing the murmurs that rippled through the packed courtroom. In the defendant's seat stood Jaden Carter, a black boy, his hands gripping the wooden rail before him. His face was composed, but his sharp eyes burned with defiance. At the judge's bench, Harold Whitmore. He was infamous for his ruthless verdicts, his unyielding belief in the system, and his ability to control his courtroom with an iron fist. And now he was looking down at Jaden, as if he were nothing more than a reckless child who had wandered into a world he could never hope to understand. He smiled. "Mr. Carter," the judge said, his voice calm, almost pleasant. "Before we proceed, I thought we might play a little game." Jaden's brow furrowed, but he kept his expression neutral. He knew better than to trust men like Whitmore. The judge leaned forward, lacing his fingers together. "It's called Truth or Lie." His gaze flickered across the room before landing back on Jaden. "I'll make a statement. You tell me whether it's true or false. A simple test of your knowledge. Would you like to participate?" A few chuckles rippled through the courtroom. Some saw it as a joke, others as a condescending test of a child's intellect. Jaden inhaled deeply. He wasn't here to play games, but refusing might be worse than playing along. He gave a curt nod. "Go ahead." Whitmore smiled victorious. He tapped his gavel lightly against the desk, then spoke in a deliberate, measured tone. "A person is innocent until proven guilty, truth or lie." Silence. Jaden's fingers curled around the edge of the defense table. The words hung in the air like a blade suspended above his head, daring him to move. Finally, his voice rang out, sharp and clear. "Lie!" Gasps erupted from the gallery. Even the stenographer's fingers hesitated for a fraction of a second before continuing their relentless typing. Jaden didn't need to turn around to know that shock had rippled through the room like an electric current. Whitmore's smirk flickered, his amusement dimming slightly. He hadn't expected that answer. "Oh?" the judge mused, tilting his head. "That's an interesting response, Mr. Carter. Care to explain?" Jaden stood taller. He had prepared for this. "Because in reality," he said, "people like me black boys are treated as guilty before they ever get the chance to prove their innocence." His voice didn't waver. "We don't get the benefit of the doubt. We don't get presumed innocent. We get handcuffed first and questioned later if we're lucky." A murmur spread across the audience, rising in volume. Some nodded, others scoffed. The tension tightened like a noose. Whitmore's smile vanished. The courtroom had shifted and he felt it. He wasn't in control anymore. He tapped his gavel once. Order. The murmuring died down, but the energy in the room remained volatile. The judge's posture stiffened. He wasn't going to let a 14-year-old dictate the tone of his courtroom. "Let's try again," Whitmore said, his voice clipped. "A judge must be completely fair and unbiased. Truth or lie?" Jaden's lips curled into a knowing smile. "Lie." This time, Whitmore's fingers twitched around the gavel. "Explain." Jaden exhaled slowly, making sure each word hit with the weight it deserved. "Because judges are human. Humans have biases, whether they admit it or not." His eyes didn't waver as they locked onto Whitmore's. "You, for example, have already decided that I'm just a kid who doesn't know what he's talking about." A ripple of shocked murmurs filled the air. The prosecution shifted uncomfortably. Even the court officers seemed unsure of how to react. Whitmore's face darkened. The amusement was gone. Now there was only steel. "You seem to think quite highly of your own insight, Mr. Carter." "I don't think highly of anything," Jaden countered. "I just think honestly." For the first time, the judge seemed truly irritated. His jaw tightened, his hands pressing against the bench. The power dynamic was shifting, and he didn't like it. Jaden wasn't just defending himself. He was exposing the cracks in a system that had never been designed for people like him, and the room knew it. Whitmore exhaled through his nose, slow and measured, as if reining in the urge to lash out. "This is a courtroom, not a debate hall," he said, "and I will not have you turning it into a spectacle." Jaden's expression didn't change. "I'm not the one making it a spectacle, Your Honor." The courtroom exploded. Some in the gallery applauded under their breath. Others whispered in hushed tones, their excitement barely contained. The prosecution's lead attorney shot up from his seat. "Your Honor, I object." Whitmore slammed the gavel down with more force than necessary. "BAM. Enough." The room fell into a heavy silence. The judge's gaze bore into Jaden like a dagger. His face was unreadable, but his eyes burned with a cold fury. He wasn't used to losing control, especially not to a black kid who was supposed to be standing there, afraid, waiting for his fate. Jaden knew what Whitmore was thinking. This boy is dangerous. He doesn't know his place. He needs to be put in check. The judge's voice came slow, deliberate. "Since you seem so confident in your understanding of the law, let's put it to the test." He leaned forward, the fluorescent lights casting sharp shadows across his face. "Do you wish to continue this trial representing yourself?" Jaden hesitated for the first time. The question had been a trap, carefully placed to back him into a corner. If he said no, Whitmore would twist his previous statements against him, painting him as nothing more than a loudmouth who didn't truly understand the system. If he said yes, he'd be expected to defend himself against a seasoned prosecutor who had spent years sending people like him to prison. The room was waiting. Jaden met the judge's gaze head-on. "I do." The courtroom collectively inhaled. Whitmore's expression flickered with something close to satisfaction, but underneath there was something else. Concern. Because in all his years on the bench, in all his years presiding over cases where black boys sat in that defendant's chair, waiting for their turn to be chewed up and spit out by the system, none of them had ever dared to fight back like this. The gavel slammed once more. "Then may the law decide." And just like that, the game had changed. Jaden wasn't just fighting for his innocence anymore. He was fighting to rip the mask off an entire system Jaden Carter had always believed in the law. He had spent hours in the library, poring over legal textbooks, fascinated by the mechanics of justice, by the idea that facts mattered more than assumptions, that truth outweighed bias. But in that moment, face pressed against the cold hood of a police car, wrists locked in steel cuffs biting into his skin, he realized that belief had been nothing more than a lie. The flashing red and blue lights painted the cracked pavement beneath him, distorting reality with every flicker. The weight of a knee dug into his back, pressing him down as if he were a caged animal. Around him, bystanders had gathered, some pulling out their phones, others whispering, their voices blending into a suffocating hum. The sound of sirens drowned out the world, but Jaden could still hear the officer's voice, sharp and final. "You matched the description." That was all it took. No questions, no hesitation, no regard for the fact that he had been in the city library, sitting at a wooden table beneath dim fluorescent lights, his fingers flipping through the worn pages of a constitutional law book when they stormed in. He had barely looked up before hands grabbed him, rough, forceful, like he was property, not a person. "Get up!" "What's going on?" Jaden had asked, trying to keep his voice steady, to keep his mind calm, but his heartbeat was already hammering in his ears. The officer didn't answer. Another one grabbed his arm, yanking him up so fast the chair he had been sitting in clattered to the ground. The librarian gasped, stepping forward, but stopped short when a third officer shot her a warning look. "What's the charge?" Jaden tried again, his voice sharper this time, demanding an explanation. "You're coming with us." "I didn't do anything," Jaden protested, his feet dragging as they hauled him toward the exit. "Tell it to the judge," one of them muttered, shoving him forward. "I didn't do anything," Jaden protested, his feet dragging as they hauled him toward the exit. "Tell it to the judge," one of them muttered, shoving him forward. It didn't matter that he hadn't resisted. It didn't matter that there had been no warrant, no probable cause. All that mattered was that he looked like the kind of boy who could have done something wrong. By the time he was forced into the back of the patrol car, his breathing was ragged, his chest heaving. The inside smelled like sweat and old leather, the cage separating him from the officers up front, a glaring reminder that he had already been judged. Outside, through the streaked windows, people were still watching, some with pity, others with silent indifference. Nobody stopped them. Nobody asked questions. They didn't have to. The system had already decided his fate. At the station, the questions were rapid fire, but none of them were the ones that should have been asked. Where were you at the time of the crime? Number Do you have an alibi? Instead, they treated him as if the case had already been solved, as if his guilt had been predetermined the moment they laid eyes on him. We have you on video, one officer said, leaning over the table. The interrogation room was cold, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, casting sharp shadows across the walls. Jaden sat rigid, jaw clenched. No, you don't. The officer smirked. You want to see it? He gestured to the screen on the far end of the room. The grainy surveillance footage played, showing a blurry figure in a hoodie walking past the scene of the robbery. The figure's face was completely obscured. The footage was dark, the angles bad. That's your evidence? Jaden asked, unable to keep the disbelief out of his voice. You fit the description, the officer said smoothly, as if that alone was proof. Jaden's blood turned to ice. You fit the description, the oldest excuse in the book. A black kid in a hoodie, Jaden said, his voice low, simmering. That's your whole case. The officer didn't flinch. You were in the area. Jaden's nails dug into his palms. I was in a library. The officer leaned in. Prove it. Jaden sucked in a slow, measured breath. I checked out a book. There's a timestamp. A record. The officer exchanged glances with his partner before shrugging. Maybe the timestamps are wrong. Maybe you checked it out and left right after. Jaden let out a short, bitter laugh. So I teleported across the city and robbed a store at the same time? The officer's expression darkened. They didn't care about proof. They just needed someone to blame, and he was the easiest target. Hours passed, no lawyer, no phone call, just a dimly lit cell and the faint scent of bleach and desperation clinging to the air. Jaden sat on the hard bench, staring at the concrete wall, replaying every second of the last few hours in his head. This isn't happening. Except it was. Outside, life went on. People went home to their families. The city bustled. And somewhere the real suspect was probably enjoying their freedom because the police had found their scapegoat. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. A metal door creaked open. Carter! An officer barked. Jaden looked up, his body stiff from sitting still for so long. You're being processed for trial, the officer said, unlocking the cell door. Jaden's heart pounded. Trial? Already? What about the alibi? The book checkout records? The fact that the video was garbage? His thoughts spiraled, but his face remained stoic, because deep down he knew. This was never about justice. This was about convenience, about power, about control. They had thrown him into the system like so many before him, and now it was up to him to fight his way out. He exhaled slowly, steeling himself. He might have walked into this police station as a victim, but he wasn't going to leave as one. The story of Jaden Carter's arrest spread like wildfire. At first, it was just another headline buried beneath the bigger scandals of the day. Teen arrested for robbery, a story barely worth a mention. But then, the details began to surface. A black boy, no weapon, no stolen goods, no evidence, just a blurry surveillance video and a so-called matching description. And suddenly the city had something to talk about. The news cycles churned, each outlet spinning its own version of the narrative. Some painted Jaden as a troubled youth, a cautionary tale of urban crime. Others questioned the police's hasty actions, subtly hinting at the racial profiling at play. But for every voice that called the arrest unjust, there were a dozen more who stood by the system. If the police arrested him, there must be a reason. Why would they target him if he was truly innocent? He shouldn't have been in the area to begin with. Talk shows debated endlessly. Legal analysts dissected the case with the cold precision of a coroner examining a lifeless body. Social media became a war zone. Justice for Jaden trended alongside trust the system. Strangers who had never met him, never heard his voice, argued over his fate as if he were nothing more than a pawn in a larger game. And yet, through all the noise, one thing remained chillingly clear: Jaden Carter was already guilty in the court of public opinion. Not because of evidence, not because of facts, but because the system had said so. As the trial resumed, the weight of the prosecution's case rested on the so-called evidence they had gathered. Now it was time for them to prove Jaden's guilt, but he was ready to dismantle every false claim they threw at him. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. The air felt heavy, charged with an energy that crackled just beneath the surface. Every seat was filled, reporters hunched over their notepads, cameras clicking in rapid succession, capturing every moment, every expression, every flicker of doubt that crossed a face. But Jaden Carter sat still, his back straight, his hands clasped together on the table before him. He refused to show fear, even as he faced a system designed to break him. At the prosecutor's table, Robert Calloway stood, his suit crisp, his expression sharp. He was a seasoned attorney, a man who had built his career on winning cases like this, cases where the accused were young, black, and already presumed guilty before the trial even began. His confidence was evident in the way he moved, the way he adjusted his tie before speaking, the way he glanced at the jury as if they were already in his pocket. "Ladies and gentlemen," Calloway began, his voice smooth, calculated, "the prosecution will now present undeniable evidence that places the defendant, Jaden Carter, at the scene of the crime." Jaden didn't move. He had expected this. Calloway turned toward the large screen positioned to the side of the courtroom. With a nod, he signaled to the technician, and the screen flickered to life. The footage was grainy, black and white, taken from a low-angle security camera outside a corner store. The timestamp in the corner read 8:42 p.m., 2 minutes before the robbery had reportedly occurred. A figure in a dark hoodie walked past the store. The resolution was so poor that the person's face was completely obscured, just a shadowy outline under the hood. The footage played for a few more seconds before cutting off abruptly. Calloway turned back to the jury, his voice unwavering. "There you have it. The defendant at the scene, moments before the crime." He let the words settle in the air. "You saw it for yourselves. You saw him." Jaden clenched his jaw. This was their smoking gun? A blurry figure in a hoodie? He leaned forward, his voice steady. "You don't see my face in that video." Calloway turned, his smirk unwavering. "The hoodie matches what you were wearing that night." Jaden exhaled slowly. He had prepared for this. He forced his hands to relax, his expression calm. "Let me ask you something, Mr. Calloway." He tilted his head slightly. "How many black boys wear hoodies?" The question hung in the air. Calloway hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. "That's irrelevant." "No," Jaden said, his voice firm. "It's very relevant. Because what you're saying is that a black kid walking down the street in a hoodie is enough to convict him of a crime." A murmur spread through the courtroom. Jaden could feel the shift in energy, the weight of doubt creeping into the minds of those watching. Judge Harold Whitmore tapped his gavel once, his face unreadable. "Let's keep the arguments focused, Mr. Carter." Jaden ignored him, locking eyes with Calloway. "Being near a crime doesn't mean you committed it. You don't have my face on that video. You don't have any proof that I went inside that store. You don't have anything except a blurry figure in a hoodie." He leaned forward. "So tell me, Mr. Calloway, where's your actual evidence?" Calloway's jaw tightened. "We have a witness." Jaden raised an eyebrow. "A witness?" Calloway nodded and turned to the jury. "That's right. Someone saw the defendant near the store that night. Someone who can confirm it was him." Jaden folded his arms. "Who?" Calloway hesitated. "For their safety, the witness has chosen to remain anonymous." Jaden let out a short, humorless laugh. "Of course, an anonymous witness, who magically saw my face even though your video doesn't show it." He shook his head. "You don't have a witness, do you?" Calloway's nostrils flared slightly. "The prosecution does not disclose." Jaden cut him off. "So let me get this straight. Your whole case is built on a blurry video and a ghost witness?" He turned to the jury. "That's what they call justice?" The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. Even some of the jurors were shifting uncomfortably. Judge Whitmore slammed his gavel down hard this time. "BAM. Enough!" His voice was firm, cutting through the tension like a blade. "The trial will proceed in an orderly fashion." Jaden's chest rose and fell slowly. He knew what was happening. Whitmore was trying to maintain control, to steer the case back in favor of the prosecution. But Jaden wasn't going to let them railroad him without a fight. He turned back to Calloway. "Show the video again." Calloway frowned. "What?" Jaden's voice didn't waver. Play the video again. The judge glanced at Calloway, then nodded. The prosecutor gritted his teeth and signaled to the technician. The screen flickered once more, the grainy footage rolling again. The shadowy figure moved past the store, head down, hands in pockets. Jaden watched closely, every detail burning into his mind. Then just as the figure stepped under a dim streetlight, something caught his attention. There, Jaden pointed. Pause it. The technician froze the frame. Jaden pushed himself up, stepping closer. Zoom in on the shoes. The technician hesitated, then did as instructed. The blurry image sharpened slightly, revealing a pair of sneakers, white with a thick black stripe on the side. Jaden turned back to Calloway. I was wearing black Converse that night. The courtroom stilled. Calloway's face paled slightly. He turned toward the screen, his lips parting slightly, as if he had just realized his mistake. Jaden didn't let up. So either I changed my shoes in the middle of the street, or... He let the words hang. That's not me in the video. Silence. A crack had formed in the prosecution's case. Judge Whitmore shifted in his seat, his fingers tightening around the gavel. He cleared his throat. The prosecution will continue. Calloway straightened, quickly recovering. The video is still strong, circumstantial evidence, and combined with the witness statement, Jaden pounced. The imaginary witness? Calloway clenched his jaw. You don't get to dictate how the prosecution presents its case. Jaden leaned back, crossing his arms. I don't have to. You're doing a great job falling apart all on your own. Laughter rippled through the audience. Even some of the jurors looked amused. Whitmore slammed his gavel down again. That's enough. He turned to Calloway. Move on. The prosecutor swallowed hard, flipping through his notes. For the first time since the trial had begun, he looked shaken. The courtroom was a storm waiting to break. The murmurs rippled like an undercurrent, a tide swelling just beneath the surface, held back only by the thin veil of decorum. Then came the announcement that should have changed everything. A uniformed officer pushed through the heavy doors, his voice cutting through the tense silence like a blade. Your Honor, we've apprehended the real suspect. For a moment, time stopped. Gasps echoed through the gallery, a wave of confusion and disbelief rolling across the room. Journalists fumbled with their pens. Cameras clicked in rapid succession. Jaden's breath caught in his throat. His fingers curled against the edge of the defense table, his mind racing to process what he had just heard. The real suspect? Then that meant he turned toward Judge Harold Whitmore, waiting, expecting to hear the words that would finally set him free. This should have been it, the moment where the nightmare ended, where justice finally did what it was meant to do. But something was wrong. Judge Whitmore didn't react the way he should have. He didn't nod. He didn't order Jaden's immediate release. Instead, he exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening around the gavel. His expression remained unreadable, but there was something else there now, annoyance. Jaden felt his stomach twist. Why wasn't he ending the trial? His lawyer, a tired-looking man who had barely spoken throughout the case, straightened in his chair. Your Honor, he said, clearing his throat, given this new information, I assume my client is free to go? The room held its breath. Whitmore's gaze swept across the courtroom, taking in the shifting energy, the flicker of uncertainty, even among the jurors. Then, in a voice that was calm, calculated, and ice-cold, he spoke. No. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Jaden's blood ran cold. His lawyer frowned. Excuse me? Whitmore adjusted his glasses, his gaze falling to Jaden with that same detached authority he had worn since the trial began. While the arrest of another suspect is noted, it does not erase the fact that the defendant was present near the scene of the crime. Jaden's body tensed. He stared at the judge, disbelief crashing over him in waves. What? His voice came out sharper than he intended, but he didn't care. You're still putting me on trial? Whitmore's tone remained unshaken. You were in the area at the time of the crime. Jaden couldn't believe what he was hearing. Being near a crime isn't a crime. His voice rose, anger bleeding through his words. That's not how this works. His lawyer, looking equally stunned, tried again. Your Honor, my client has an alibi. The only evidence against him was circumstantial, And now we know there is an actual perpetrator. Whitmore didn't waver. The trial will continue. The words hit Jaden like a sledgehammer. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder, a current of voices swelling into something dangerously close to outrage. Someone in the back stood up. "This is a joke!" another voice shouted. Whitmore's gavel slammed down. BAM. Order! But the people didn't quiet as quickly as they had before, because now it was obvious. This wasn't about justice. This was about power, about control, about a system that had decided Jaden's fate long before the trial even started. Jaden's pulse pounded in his ears. His breathing was fast, his thoughts racing. This wasn't just wrong, this was madness. He turned fully to Whitmore now, his voice low but edged with steel. "So what are you saying?" His hands balled into fists. "That just being near a crime scene makes me guilty?" Whitmore's gaze hardened. "I am saying that this court still has reason to believe." Jaden cut him off, fire in his voice now. "If I was white, would we even be having this conversation?" The question ripped through the air like a gunshot. The courtroom froze. Whitmore's jaw tightened, his fingers gripping the gavel like a lifeline. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence spoke for him. Jaden let out a slow breath, his chest rising and falling as he scanned the room. They all saw it now. The jurors, the reporters, even the courtroom guards. They saw the system for what it really was. For the first time since the trial began, Whitmore looked like a man trying to hold something together that was already falling apart. He could feel control slipping through his fingers. Jaden straightened, his voice steady, unwavering. "You have no case," he said, his words a challenge, a declaration. "No evidence, no testimony that holds up. You arrested me because I fit the description. You kept me here because it was convenient." Whitmore's face darkened, his gavel slamming down again. BAM. "Enough." But Jaden didn't stop. "You don't want justice," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You just want me to lose." Gasps. The murmurs swelled again. Whitmore's mask of control cracked. He looked at Jaden, and for the first time, there was something beneath the cold exterior. Fear, because he knew Jaden wasn't scared anymore. For so long, the judge had been in control. The system had been in control. But now Jaden Carter was winning. Whitmore exhaled slowly, his shoulders stiff. He adjusted his glasses, his expression unreadable. He tapped the gavel once more, his voice eerily even. "This court is adjourned for today. We will reconvene tomorrow." Jaden stared at him, his chest heaving. Tomorrow? They were just delaying the inevitable. But fine, he'd be back. And next time, he wouldn't just be defending himself. He'd be taking the whole system down with him. The courthouse corridors were dimly lit, the fluorescent bulbs flickering overhead, casting sharp shadows on the linoleum floor. Jaden Carter moved carefully, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, trying to make himself as invisible as possible. The break between sessions was supposed to be a moment of reprieve, but his mind was racing too fast to rest. Something was wrong. He could feel it in the way Judge Whitmore had refused to dismiss the case, even after the real suspect had been caught. He could see it in the way the prosecutor, Robert Calloway, had tightened his jaw, his frustration barely concealed beneath his polished courtroom demeanor. Jaden turned a corner and stopped just before the vending machines. His mouth was dry, his throat tight. He wasn't even sure what he was doing where he was going. But then, as if fate had placed him in exactly the right spot at exactly the right time, he heard voices, low, hushed, urgent. Instinct kicked in. He froze, pressing himself against the wall just outside the partially open break room door. He knew eavesdropping was a risk, but something told him this was worth the danger. Inside, two figures stood under the dim glow of a flickering overhead light, Calloway and a uniformed officer. Their backs were to Jaden, their heads bent slightly toward each other. The officer's voice was clipped, impatient. "We need to wrap this up fast." Jaden's breath caught in his throat. Calloway crossed his arms, his tone quieter, but no less sharp. "Can we stretch it out longer?" The officer exhaled, shaking his head. "No need." Orders came from above. A slow chill crawled down Jaden's spine. Orders came from above. His mind spun with possibilities. What orders? From who? Calloway's fingers drummed against his forearm as he stared at the floor, deep in thought. Then finally he spoke. And Whitmore? The officer let out a short, humorless chuckle. Already handling it. He'll make sure it drags long enough for everything to settle. But at the end of the day, you know how this works. Jaden clenched his jaw. You know how this works. That single sentence was enough to make his blood boil. Because he did know how this worked. He had been watching it unfold since the moment they threw him in handcuffs for a crime he didn't commit. It didn't matter that the truth was out there. It didn't matter that they had caught the real suspect. The system wasn't designed to clear his name. It was designed to break him. A chair scraped against the tile. The conversation was ending. Move. Now Jaden took a step back, his heart pounding. His legs felt heavy, his body screaming at him to run, to disappear before they noticed him. But he forced himself to walk steady, controlled, normal. If they caught him lurking, he was done. A voice stopped him cold. Carter. Jaden's body went rigid. His pulse hammered in his ears, but he forced himself to keep moving. Maybe he had imagined it. Maybe if he just, don't walk away. Jaden turned. Captain Victor Reynolds stood in the hallway watching him. The man was a fortress of authority, his uniform pristine, his gold badge gleaming under the dim courthouse lighting. Everything about him screamed power, control, and something far more dangerous certainty. He wasn't here to talk. He was here to end something. Reynolds took a slow step forward, his boots clicking sharply against the linoleum. You've been busy, he said, voice calm, even. Too calm. Jaden's fists clenched at his sides. He didn't respond. Reynolds exhaled through his nose, his sharp gaze never leaving Jaden's face. I don't like messy situations, Carter. And right now, you're making a mess. He tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. That's not good for you. Jaden swallowed down the fire rising in his chest. He knew what this was. A warning disguised as advice. A noose disguised as a handshake. But he refused to be scared into silence. What's wrong, Captain? Jaden asked, keeping his voice steady. Afraid the truth might slip out? A flicker of amusement crossed Reynolds' face, but it was gone as quickly as it came. He stepped in closer, lowering his voice to something just above a whisper. I'm going to make this simple for you, Reynolds said, his words slow, measured. Walk away. Drop this. Do whatever it takes to make it to the end of this trial without causing any more trouble. His eyes locked onto Jaden's, dark and unblinking. Because if you don't, you're going to find yourself in a situation you won't walk away from. The air felt thinner, like all the oxygen had been sucked out of the hallway. Jaden stared him down, forcing his breath to remain steady. He could feel the heat of rage rising inside him, the suffocating weight of a system that had never meant to let him go free. But fear had no place here. He leaned in slightly, his voice just as quiet, just as sharp. I guess we'll see about that. Reynolds' jaw tightened just barely. His hand twitched like he was itching to reach for something. His badge, his gun, his authority. But then, just as quickly, he relaxed. A slow smirk curled at the edge of his lips. You've got guts, kid, he murmured. Shame that won't save you. He took a step back, adjusting his sleeves. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, his boots clicking down the hall until he disappeared through the double doors. Jaden didn't move. He didn't breathe, because he knew exactly what had just happened. Captain Reynolds hadn't come to threaten him. He had come to deliver a promise. The system had decided they weren't going to let him win. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated Jaden Carter. The fight for justice is just beginning. More shocking twists are ahead. Don't miss a moment. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay with us. Thank you for standing for truth and justice. Where are you watching from? Let us know. After Reynolds' warning, Jaden knew one thing for certain: he was running out of time. If the system was rigged against him, he needed proof. The night was thick with silence, broken only by the distant hum of streetlights buzzing against the cool air. Jaden Carter sat hunched in the dim glow of an old laptop screen, his fingers tensed over the keyboard. Across from him, Elijah Brooks leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, an eyebrow raised. "This is a bad idea," Elijah muttered. Jaden didn't look up. "Then why are you still here?" Elijah sighed, rubbing his temples. "Because you're my best friend, and because I know you won't let this go until we see what's inside." They were in Elijah's basement, an old cluttered space filled with tangled wires and half-dismantled computer parts, his personal hacking den. The air smelled faintly of dust and overheated circuits. Jaden clenched his jaw. He had no choice but to do this. Reynolds had all but promised him that the system wouldn't let him win. If he wanted the truth, he had to take it himself. Elijah cracked his knuckles and leaned forward. "All right," he sighed. "Let's see how deep this rabbit hole goes." His fingers flew over the keyboard, typing in strings of code, bypassing firewalls with the ease of someone who had done this a dangerous number of times. The screen filled with scrolling data, police files, reports, records hidden behind layers of security. Then bingo. "All right," Elijah muttered. "We're in." Jaden's pulse thundered in his ears. "Search the suspect," he said, his voice low. Elijah typed quickly, then froze. His face twisted in confusion. Jaden leaned closer. "What? What's wrong?" Elijah tapped the screen, scrolling through the file. "This doesn't make sense. There's nothing here." Jaden's stomach tightened. "What do you mean nothing?" "I mean nothing. No ID, no mugshot, no background. Just a name and a single line confirming his arrest." Elijah's voice dropped, tension thick. "This guy doesn't exist." Jaden's skin went cold. The police had arrested a ghost, a fabricated suspect to cover their tracks. "They created him," Jaden whispered. Elijah nodded slowly, his expression dark. "They needed someone to take the fall so they wouldn't have to drop your case. They needed the public to think they got the right guy." He shook his head. "But he's just a placeholder." Jaden's hands curled into fists. They never planned on letting him walk free. His breath came slow, measured, controlled, but his mind was racing. If they had faked an entire suspect, then how much more had they tampered with? "Elijah," Jaden said, forcing his voice to stay steady, "check my file." Elijah hesitated. "Jaden." "Check it." Elijah exhaled sharply, then started typing. The screen flickered, and then Jaden stilled. His file was wrong. It wasn't just a case file anymore. It was a criminal record. Jaden felt his blood go ice cold. They had altered his history, made him look like a repeat offender. "What the?" Elijah's voice cut off, his eyes wide. He scrolled through the falsified details, his fingers trembling. "They changed your record," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They added prior offenses, vandalism, theft, resisting arrest." He looked up, horrified. "Jaden, they're making you look like a career criminal." Jaden's heartbeat pounded against his ribs. "They're setting me up," he said quietly. Elijah swallowed hard. "They want to make sure that no matter what happens in court, no one believes you." Jaden's fingers dug into the edge of the desk. This wasn't just a case. They were erasing him. "They're making sure I don't walk out of this," he muttered. "They're rewriting my life so that even if I prove my innocence, I'll still be guilty in the eyes of the system." Elijah's hands hovered over the keyboard. "We need to copy this. All of it." Jaden nodded, his jaw tight. "Save everything." Elijah started extracting the files, his fingers flying, but his expression was grim. "This isn't just corruption," he muttered. "This is orchestrated. Someone high up wants you gone." Jaden clenched his fists. Reynolds, Whitmore, Calloway. They were all in on it. Elijah's laptop beeped, signaling the download was complete. He yanked out the flash drive and handed it to Jaden. "This is your insurance," he said. "Whatever happens next, we have proof." Then Elijah stiffened. "Jaden!" There was something in his voice, a sharp edge of panic. Jaden followed his gaze to the window. A black SUV was parked across the street, engine running, lights off. Jaden's breath hitched. Elijah swallowed hard. "Tell me that's not for us." Jaden didn't answer. Then the driver's door opened. "Elijah," Jaden said, his voice deadly calm, "we need to move. Now." Elijah yanked the flash drive from the laptop and shoved it into his pocket. Jaden snapped the laptop shut and grabbed his hoodie, his body already shifting into fight-or-flight mode. They ran. The front door was too risky. The back alley faster. Jaden threw open the basement door, Elijah close behind. Footsteps heavy and fast pounded against pavement outside. Someone was coming for them. They burst into the alley, cold air slamming into their lungs. Behind them, the SUV revved, tires screeching. Jaden grabbed Elijah's sleeve. Left! They sprinted down the narrow alley, jumping over trash bags, dodging dumpsters. The SUV skidded around the corner, blocking the street ahead. Crap! Elijah gasped. Jaden whipped around, dragging Elijah toward a side fence. Climb! They scrambled up, metal rattling under their weight. A car door slammed. Footsteps. Fast. Close. Hands grasped at Jaden's ankle. He kicked out hard, sending his attacker stumbling back. He vaulted over the fence, hitting the ground hard but not stopping. Elijah landed beside him, panting. Dude, we are actually going to die. Jaden ignored him, scanning for an escape route. The SUV whipped around, headlights flooding the alley. Then another set of headlights appeared at the far end, a black sedan. It skidded to a halt, and the driver's door flew open. Vanessa Carter. Get in, she shouted. Jaden and Elijah didn't hesitate. They dove into the back seat, slamming the doors just as Vanessa hit the gas. The SUV screeched after them. Bullets ripped through the night, shattering the back windshield. Jaden ducked low, adrenaline spiking through his veins. Vanessa didn't flinch, her hands steady on the wheel. What the hell did you two do? She demanded. Elijah, still panting, threw up his hands. Oh, you know, just hacked into police files, found out Jaden was being framed, and now some guys with guns want to kill us. So, totally normal night. Jaden shot him a glare. Not helping. Vanessa swerved hard, the car narrowly missing a telephone pole. Behind them, the SUV was still gaining. Jaden's fingers dug into the seat. Vanessa, we need to lose them. She gritted her teeth. Working on it. Ahead, a narrow alley. Vanessa whipped the wheel, sending the car into a sharp turn. The SUV was too big to follow. It screeched to a stop, trapped at the entrance. Vanessa didn't slow down. She gunned it, pushing the car further into the night. Jaden exhaled for the first time in minutes. Elijah groaned, pressing a hand over his racing heart. I am never hanging out with you again. Jaden let out a shaky breath. We're not done yet. He pulled the flash drive from Elijah's pocket, holding it tight in his palm. They had proof now, and they were going to burn the whole damn system down with it. The city pulsed with quiet tension as Vanessa Carter pulled her car into the underground parking garage beneath her office. The tires screeched slightly as she braked hard, the echoes bouncing off the concrete walls. She threw the car into park, exhaling sharply before turning to face Jaden Carter and Elijah Brooks, who sat wide-eyed in the back seat, still catching their breath from the chase. We don't have much time, she said, reaching for her phone. If they were willing to chase you down like that, it means they know you have something. She locked eyes with Jaden, her expression firm. And that means we need to move, now. Jaden nodded, gripping the flash drive so tightly in his palm that he could feel the plastic edges digging into his skin. This small device held everything: proof of corruption, of falsified records, of a system so determined to bury him that they had fabricated an entire suspect just to keep their lies afloat. Elijah swallowed hard. So what's the plan? Do we just walk into a police station and hand it over? Vanessa scoffed. If you're looking to get arrested or worse, sure, but we're not playing by their rules. She turned to Jaden. We need to make this public, loud, unavoidable. Jaden's heart pounded. He had spent days fighting to be heard in a courtroom that was designed to silence him. But the court wasn't the only battlefield. The world needed to see what they had done. Vanessa led them upstairs to her office, a dimly lit space cluttered with case files and stacks of legal documents. It smelled like old paper and stale coffee, a place where truths were usually buried, not unearthed. She powered up her desktop, the screen flickering to life. Plug it in! Jaden stepped forward, his hands shaking only slightly as he inserted the flash drive into the port. The files loaded instantly, a flood of damning evidence spilling onto the screen. Police reports with altered timestamps, falsified records, the fake suspect with no identity, Jaden's own file, doctored to make him look like a criminal. Elijah let out a slow breath. Man, this is huge. Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line. This isn't just about you, Jaden. This is proof of a system-wide cover-up. She turned to him. If we do this right, it won't just clear your name. It'll take down everyone involved. Jaden clenched his fists. Reynolds, Whitmore, Calloway. They had all played a part in trying to bury him alive. But now he had the shovel. Vanessa cracked her knuckles. All right, first we leak it to the press. We send this to every journalist, every independent investigator who's ever wanted to take down police corruption. Then we hit social media hard. Elijah grinned, already pulling out his phone. Now that's my area of expertise. He started typing furiously, setting up burner accounts, queuing posts, preparing hashtags. We need this to go viral, not just trending unstoppable. Jaden took a deep breath. He had never been the kind of person who wanted attention. Now he had no choice. Vanessa began forwarding files to trusted journalists, her fingers moving fast. We're sending it in waves. First, the police corruption, then the falsified evidence, and last, the fact that they framed a 14-year-old kid to protect their system. Jaden exhaled, his chest tight. And what happens after that? Vanessa's gaze was sharp. We watched them burn. The next few hours passed in a blur. Elijah worked on spreading the files across multiple platforms: Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, even underground forums that specialize in exposing government corruption. Vanessa kept her contacts informed, ensuring that the story couldn't be silenced before it had a chance to explode. Jaden watched it all unfold, his mind spinning. Every click, every post, every shared file was a battle won. Then it happened. The internet caught fire. The first news article broke within an hour. New evidence suggests police framed black teen in high-profile case. Then another. Judge Whitmore under fire after shocking evidence leak. Then the hashtag started. Free Jaden. The system is rigged. Justice for Jaden. His name was everywhere, and with it, the truth. Comments poured in, some in shock, some furious. Some people still refused to believe it, clinging to their faith in the system. But others were ready for war. Jaden stared at the screen, his breath shaky. He had spent so long fighting to be heard. Now his voice was being amplified by thousands. Elijah nudged him. We did it, man. Jaden swallowed, his hands still trembling. Not yet. Because he knew what came next. They had forced Reynolds and the others into a corner, and cornered animals were the most dangerous. The world had finally seen the truth. For weeks, Jaden Carter had fought to prove his innocence. He had been silenced, ignored, and nearly erased. But now the system that tried to bury him was crumbling. The headlines hit like a shockwave. Prosecutor Robert Calloway resigns amid evidence tampering allegations. Judge Whitmore suspended indefinitely following corruption scandal. Internal investigation launched into false conviction of Jaden Carter. Jaden sat at Vanessa's desk, staring at the news reports flooding every screen. Social media was on fire. News anchors debated his case on live television. Protesters stood outside the courthouse, demanding justice not just for him, but for everyone the system had failed. They had won, but it didn't feel like victory. Elijah sat beside him, scrolling through his phone. Calloway didn't even make a statement before stepping down, he muttered. Dude ran like a coward. Vanessa leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Because he knows if he opens his mouth, he's done. The DA's office is trying to contain the damage, but it's too late. His career is over. Jaden should have felt relief. He should have been celebrating. Instead, his fingers tightened into fists. What about Reynolds? He asked, voice steady. A heavy silence fell over the room. Vanessa sighed, rubbing her temples. That's the problem. She turned the laptop toward him. He's gone. Jaden's stomach dropped. What do you mean, gone? Elijah frowned, leaning in. Vanessa clicked through news reports. There was nothing. No statement, no press release, no mention of Reynolds in any official documents. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. Whitmore got suspended. Calloway resigned. But Reynolds? Vanessa exhaled sharply. There's no record of him stepping down. No mention of an internal investigation into him. The man just vanished. Jaden's jaw clenched. Reynolds had known this was coming. He ran. Vanessa nodded. or someone made sure he wouldn't be found. Jaden's pulse pounded. This wasn't over. Not even close. Elijah leaned back, shaking his head. I don't get it. The guy was a captain, a high-ranking officer. He can't just disappear. Jaden's voice was quiet but filled with certainty. He can if the people protecting him are bigger than we thought. The thought made the air feel thicker, heavier. Reynolds wasn't just some corrupt cop. He had powerful people backing him, people who had made sure he wouldn't face consequences. Elijah swallowed. So what do we do? Jaden exhaled slowly, his mind racing. A week had passed since the scandal broke, since headlines had screamed, "Prosecutor resigns in shame," since Judge Whitmore had been stripped of his position. The media had feasted on the story for days: corruption, police cover-ups, and the near destruction of a 14-year-old boy's future. Then, as expected, they moved on. Jaden Carter sat on his bed, the glow of his phone screen illuminating his tired face. He scrolled through endless news articles, watching how quickly the world forgot. They always forgot. For a moment, he had been at the center of something big. His case had sparked protests, debates, even a call for justice reform. People had flooded the streets demanding accountability. But now there were new stories to tell, new villains to expose, and the one villain Jaden had wanted to see behind bars, Captain Victor Reynolds, had disappeared. There had been no official statements, no arrests, no hearings, nothing. Vanessa had warned him that Reynolds wouldn't go down so easily. Men like him don't get punished, she had said. They just disappear until it's safe to come back. Jaden didn't want to believe it. He had fought too hard, lost too much. And yet, it was as if Reynolds had simply erased himself from existence. Jaden let out a slow breath and shut off his phone. He needed to clear his head. The air in his room felt too thick, too heavy, like an invisible force was pressing down on him. Maybe it was just paranoia. Maybe he needed to move on, like everyone else. Then his phone buzzed. A single notification. Unknown number. Jaden frowned, unlocking the screen. His eyes narrowed as he read the message. "We're watching you." A sharp chill ran down his spine. His body went still, muscles locking in place. His pulse thumped against his ribs. His first instinct was denial. Maybe it was a mistake, a prank, a random troll trying to get under his skin. But deep down, he knew. It wasn't random. Jaden sat up slowly, eyes darting around his darkened room. The blinds were shut, the door locked. But suddenly it didn't feel safe. His phone buzzed again. "You should have let it go." Jaden exhaled sharply, his grip tightening around the device. His heart pounded, a steady, angry rhythm. Reynolds. He wasn't in prison. He wasn't under investigation. He was still out there, still pulling strings, still watching. Jaden's mind spun. The message wasn't just a warning, it was a reminder. Reynolds wasn't running. He was waiting, waiting for the dust to settle, waiting for Jaden to slip up, waiting for the world to forget. Jaden forced himself to breathe. The fear clawing at his chest wasn't going to help him. He needed to think. His fingers moved across the keyboard, hesitating only briefly before he typed his response. "Come find me." He hit send, and then he waited, because this wasn't over. Not yet. Jaden stood on the cracked sidewalk, watching as a soft breeze stirred the detritus of a city that had started to move on from his story, from the scandal that had momentarily consumed its headlines. He knew better than anyone that a single victory, no matter how public or dramatic, did not truly dismantle the system responsible for his near downfall. Yes, he had escaped prison. Yes, he had forced resignations. And yes, he had exposed corruption. But the deeper architecture of injustice remained firmly in place, looming like a fortress carved from centuries of prejudice and power. The fact that Captain Reynolds had vanished rather than answer for his crimes told Jaden that the shadows still harbored those who believed themselves untouchable. He could picture Reynolds in some undisclosed office, biding his time, waiting for the heat to die down before re-emerging like a ghost. Jaden had once glimpsed the chilling certainty in Reynolds' eyes, a man who saw laws as pliable obstacles rather than moral anchors. People like that did not simply vanish. They adapted, they survived, and they thrived. Jaden had learned a cruel lesson about how deeply these forces shaped his reality. He had been arrested, dragged through a trial that declared him guilty the moment he set foot in the courtroom, all for daring to be a smart black kid in the wrong place at the wrong time. The system's gears had nearly crushed him, tried to rewrite his entire history to suit its narrative, to brand him as a savage in a hoodie who must be locked away. Even with the evidence he had brought to light, fake suspects, altered records, a judge who laughed at impartiality, he knew the system had not truly changed. Hollow promises of reform filled the air, and fleeting press conferences declared an internal review was underway. Yet beneath that surface, the same old structures thrived. If a boy like Jaden could be manipulated so easily, there were countless others whose stories never even made the papers. Knowing that, Jaden recognized he could not just walk away. An ember of determination burned inside him, fed by each indignity he had endured. He felt it intensify whenever he remembered how close he had come to spending years behind bars. He recalled the swirl of crowds outside the courthouse, some chanting his name, others demanding his imprisonment. In that chaos, he realized that if he did not use this spotlight to push for real change, then everything he went through would be for nothing. And so, a mere week after escaping a sham trial, he started planning his next move. He no longer wanted to simply survive. He wanted to ensure that the machine that nearly swallowed him could not do the same to others. This time, he wanted to uproot the rot. He was only 14, armed with limited resources and a small circle of allies: Elijah, a tech-savvy friend who had unearthed the truth, and Vanessa, the lawyer who had refused to let the powerful crush him. Together, they had accomplished more than anyone would have believed. Yet this fight was bigger than three determined individuals. Jaden would need more voices, more courage, and a movement that extended beyond social media outrage. Each day, he pored over laws with renewed intensity, searching for cracks in the structure. He read about civil rights heroes who had confronted even more brutal injustices in times when entire governments sanctioned oppression. He took notes, highlighted passages, plastered quotes on his bedroom walls to surround himself with reminders that no system of oppression was truly invincible. The city returned to routine. The roiling outrage settled into old currents of apathy, with many shrugging, believing they had done enough by noticing the scandal. That boy at the center, the one whose face dominated the news, was just another fleeting headline. Jaden, however, was still here, plotting not vengeance but lasting justice. He lay awake envisioning grassroots campaigns, alliances with reporters who refused to let truth be buried under spin. He imagined a place where a kid like him could walk without fear of being snatched by an officer who decided he fit the description. The question remained, how to sustain momentum once the scandal dulled in the public mind? Giving up was not an option. He thought of the children who might follow, brilliant and curious, doomed to become stereotypes if someone did not challenge the architecture of injustice. He also remembered the night he had fled from gunfire, the dark SUV that had pursued him, the raw terror of knowing the system was a ravenous beast with jaws ready to snap shut. If he quit, that beast would feed on others, never sated. No, he carried a responsibility. He might be free, but invisible chains still encircled him. He had to fight. Even if he stood alone, he would fight, because the alternative was to let darkness claim future generations. Elijah was with him, and Vanessa had promised to use every legal tool to protect them. Others might join too, awakened by the seeds of truth Jaden had sown. Reynolds might have faded into the shadows, but shadows could be lit. Whitmore was off the bench. Yet the bench was an institution, and institutions could be reformed or dismantled if pressed hard enough. Passing the half-faded graffiti that once demanded justice for Jaden, he understood this was a beginning, not a conclusion. It was easy to cheer a judge or prosecutor's fall, but the fortress of injustice stood tall, older than them all. Watching them fall proved how fragile the system could be when confronted with persistent truth. He smiled grimly, footsteps echoing on deserted streets. Yes, he had won a battle, but the war raged on. He felt it in his bones, that electric pulse fueling him with the conviction that he could never be done until the day no child endured what he endured. This was the genesis of something larger than a single person's fight, more than a headline or viral post. It was the forging of a new path, a promise that one day the ideals carved into courthouse pillars would mean more than empty words. He glanced up at a street lamp, recalling how he once stood beneath it, handcuffed, his future in question. Now he stood as an architect of change, free yet carrying a mission. No neat, happy ending awaited, only the promise of a revolution brewing within his heart. One day, he vowed, the world would see a justice system that truly served everyone. One day, the name Jaden Carter would not be a near tragedy, but a spark that ignited a movement. With every step, he reminded himself that even if the fight felt lonely, even if the system appeared immovable, he was prepared. Because nothing was more potent than a believer who refused to yield, who refused to let the next generation grow up in the same shadow. He lifted his collar against the wind and pressed on, determined to tear down the walls. This was only the opening salvo. The real battle was just beginning. He remembered the gavel strikes, the scorn in the eyes of officials who never gave him the benefit of the doubt. He recalled the hush that fell whenever he tried to speak up, the weight of a system that preferred obedience to justice. Yet he also remembered the spark he felt when evidence of corruption splashed across social media, when people from every corner of the city rallied to his side, refusing to be blind any longer. That spark was still alive, dancing in his chest, urging him to continue, to defy every limit they placed before him. He would learn the law, break it down piece by piece, until he knew exactly where to strike, exactly which flaw to expose. And he would gather people, families tired of living in fear, activists who believed every life mattered, teachers who refused to let their students be profiled by the color of their skin. One day the fortress of injustice would crumble beneath their collective will. He was certain of it, more certain than he had ever been of anything. This was his path now, his oath, and he would not be silent. He was Jaden Carter, and he was nobody's scapegoat. He was the architect of the fight to come. His revolution began now. If Jaden's fight for justice moved you, don't let this story fade away. Like this video to show your support, subscribe to stay updated on more eye-opening stories, and share to spread awareness. Every click, every comment, and every share keeps the conversation alive. Justice isn't just a headline, it's a battle we must keep fighting. Let's make sure voices like Jaden's are heard, not silenced. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter in this fight. Your support matters. Be part of the change. Like, subscribe, share. The fight continues,